Folks, I hope you'll enjoy this interview with Kim O'Malley. Kim O'Malley is just an amazing person. She works with Girls on the Run. Previously, she worked with the Girls Athletic Leadership School in both capacities, helping them with their curriculum around social emotional learning. But she's an ultra runner, and she has a background in coaching as well. Coached for 9 years as a high school coach as well. So enjoy this interview where we talked about burnout, talked about the idea how the concept of self-care is important, but that word isn't great. It's a wide-ranging conversation, and she's part of the Boulder Running Clinic's 2020-2021 winter webinar series. So at the end of this video, I'll talk a little bit about that. Thanks. Okay, Kim, thanks so much for joining me for this, we're calling it the winter webinar series for the Boulder Running Clinic. You and I had the chance to be in Boulder this past, I don't know about you, but January 2020 seems like so long ago. Oh my gosh.
Different world.
Yeah, crazy.
The before.
Yeah. It was the first time we had met. You did a fantastic job there. So it's great to have you be part of this, and I'm sorry that we're not able to do something in person this year. But
yeah, I think we'll all appreciate being in person just that much more when we can do that without anxiety or concern for safety. So I'm looking forward to those days again.
Yeah. Exactly. So you're going to join us live for our webinar where we talk with John O'Malley, who it turns out you're related to. He's your brother, John O'Malley, Jesse Magato, and myself. Can you give us a little background about your in terms of your life as an educator, what you do now, but also give us a little coaching background to kind of what I want to say, kind of set up everything you're about to share with us now.
Yeah, so I've been in education for 20 years, and throughout all of that time, my focus has been pairing character development or social emotional learning alongside whatever educational role that I had at that time. And so I began my life as an educator by taking high school students out into the backcountry of Alaska for 40 days while we worked on resilience building, teamwork, communication skills. I eventually found my way into the public school classroom, where I was a head cross country and track coach for both girls, boys, and co-ed. And so I coached cross country and track for about 9 or 10 years. I also moved from California to Colorado and coached in Boulder as a head track and field coach there for a few years. And the most recent roles that I have played have been working on developing social emotional learning and looking at the links between that and participating in sports or movement. So I have worked for the Girls Athletic Leadership School in Denver and a national nonprofit called Girls Leadership. So focusing also particularly on the experiences that align with gender and gender expectations. And I'm currently developing content for Girls on the Run International, which also incorporates that leadership, social emotional learning piece with running. And so it's been kind of an ongoing theme across 20 years of my career. It also is alive well in my personal life as a person who continues to run and compete and I do so often to kind of practice or exercise these life skills.
And this isn't in our notes that we know we want to cover, but can you maybe share? I know John O'Malley might be annoyed with me if I don't ask this. When you run an ultramarathon, explain what you mean when you say I want to see I want to see who I am at the 70-mile mark of a 100-mile run, and if that maybe applies to November and December 2020?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I spoke to my brother's team, Carl Sandburg High School cross country. I think it was last summer. And I had explained to the team that my motivation for running ultramarathons or 100 milers, I even have a longer distance on the brain right now if things work out, but was not so much to run 100 miles or to cross the finish line and say, wow, I ran 100 miles. That's amazing. But instead to have that experience at mile 80. And the reason that was because I was really curious about how one might handle a situation in which you've gone so far and you're absolutely depleted. And yet, looking ahead, there's so much more to go. A lot of us have run marathons or gone out for a 20-mile training run. Put 80 miles in front of that, and I felt it was this opportunity to really know a part of myself that I don't necessarily get to that place often. And I think, yeah, in terms of this moment in 2020, I think a lot of us might be feeling like we're at mile 80 right now. Like we've gone a long ways and there's still a long way to go. So how are we managing that? And that was the curiosity and the drive for me to venture out and run through the night for nearly 30 hours. I wasn't so much curious who I'd be at the finish line. I was more wanting to meet that human at that kind of crux.
Wow. Wow. That is a fantastic way. I mean, and this is an aside, but you and I live in the state of Colorado. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like everybody who runs 100, they're absolutely running it to say, I ran 100 miles. And it's fascinating to hear that. And anybody who's run, I mean, of course it's mile 80 and not 70, what I said, because so many of us have done a 20-mile run. And just like you said, put 80 before it is
Mhm.
crazy. Our topic generally is burnout. We
Mhm.
could be talking about burnout in athletes, but I want to focus this mostly on burnout in coaches. Now, this was actually brought up to me by an extremely successful coach this summer who said, sometime when you run a clinic, you should talk about burnout. And as we just got
Mhm.
closer and closer to this, I thought, this is even more important now. Should we start going through our notes here, or is there anything that you think in that last story might relate to the topic of burnout? Maybe just from a numerical standpoint, like we're recording this in early November. We don't have a vaccine. You and I live in a state where kids aren't going to school. There's other states where kids are totally in school. I mean, things are so different from state to state. As we're recording this, my daughter, I hear fast feet moving upstairs because she goes to girls athletic leadership school and she has to do movement, right? While
Mhm.
we're trying to work, essentially. So it's just, there's just so many things going on. We could even view this through the lens of we have so many stressors. How is that different than what you've seen in other years in education? Yeah, so
Well,
all kinds of things there, but if we want to just start with burnout, how what does that term mean for you, and how should coaches be thinking about that?
yeah, I think right now the metaphor that I have for this moment in time really aligns with like this tremendous event that happened in the ultra running community recently called the Big Dog Backyard Ultra. And so for those folks that aren't familiar with this insane event, but I think it really kind of captures how we might be feeling right now and how this might be different than say a normal season or school year. But the way that this event runs is there's a 4-mile course, a 4-mile loop. Runners line up at the starting line at the top of the hour. The gun goes off, and you've got 1 hour to complete that loop. Whatever time is left over, like if you run it in 40 minutes, you've got 20 minutes before you're back at the starting line again to run the same loop. And so on the hour, every hour, the gun goes off again, and you keep going until you are the last person standing. And so every time you line up, you have no idea if you are halfway, if you have only a few more laps to go. You have no idea how long it's going to go for. And so you have to keep getting yourself to the starting line without that context, without really that mental, kind of a waypoint system of where I am, how much do I have to go, how much more do I think I can go. You just keep going. And the other thing about this race, which I think is really interesting, is the way that it is set up is that the winner, there's one winner, everybody else is considered non-finishers. You can only go one more lap than the last person who dropped out. And so really, it doesn't matter necessarily how long you as an individual to go. Like, you need others to be able to continue on so that you can continue on just a little bit further. And so that person eventually is called the assist. And so this event just happened. Courtney DeWalter, former teacher at Gals, science teacher, by the way, won it, tied the record. It was 68 4-mile laps. So that's 68 hours of running, 283 miles she ran in that time. But she would not have been able to go that distance unless Harvey Lewis had gone 67, if that makes sense. So the reason I bring this up is I think this is an absolutely insane event because of that mental anguish of just not knowing how long it's going to go for, and realizing, you need that assist, that person to be able to be the winner ultimately, that you can't just do it on your own. And they also have what's called cheerleaders. So at the start finish line, there are people there, instead of cheering them on, are actually telling them to drop out and telling them this isn't worth it. And, so they're actually people kind of heckling.
That's hilarious. Cheerleaders.
Yeah. So I feel like this is a lot like 2020. Like, we have no idea at what point in this like ultimate endurance event of our life that we are in. There are hecklers, there are all sorts of things going on, and it's mentally grueling. And yet we're tasked with getting ourselves back to the starting line again and again and again. So whether it's for ourselves or for someone else. And so I kind of put this idea of burnout in the context of this insane event. I think they line up quite a bit.
Yeah, and I don't even think we have to draw the parallels of like the cheerleaders as parents or as administrators or state, cross-country associations or wow, that is fantastic. So you also talked about a frame and a lens. How are those words important? And one of the things you talk about is psychological distancing. Can you explain what that is and how that applies?
Well, I think thinking of this, backyard ultra race as, the metaphor for burnout, certainly in the time of the pandemic, I think it can teach us a lot about how to cope with it. And really, I think what I am able to share with folks today are just some mindset habits that, we as coaches or teachers or parents can try and practice for ourselves, but also pass on and teach our athletes as important life skills. And one of those is just recognizing that the frame or the lens that we're looking at this particular challenge or setback or set of difficult feelings, like that framing does matter. And what I mean by that is, I just said, I'm framing this pandemic, this point in my life, as like the greatest endurance event of my life. And how do I want to like have that story unfold? When I fast forward into the future, what is the story, the honest story? So not the like rainbows and butterflies version of it, but what is the honest story that I would like to tell of how I handled this tough situation and or these tough feelings? And so part of that puts a little bit of psychological distance between like me and what's happening. And coaches, I think, do this well. My brother does this really well. The way that he does it with his team is, you might notice on every year the team t-shirt has a different phrase, original phrase. So not, famous, quote from somebody, but they put that season in the context of really the story that they're going to tell that year. And so each year the t-shirt has some other phrase, and there's a story behind it. And that's really what that particular unique team in that time and place are going to set out and accomplish or tell. And so I think when we're in the midst of a difficult situation, we can stop and fast forward and say, okay, well, what is it my future self is going to be able to say about how I handle this? How, what context am I going to put it in? And I'll talk a little bit more about this tool called psychological distancing later, but it's highly effective in taking what might be those overwhelming feelings that burnout brings in, like isolation, exasperation, resentment, tough feelings, right? And be able to put some distance between those and your rational thinking brain to figure out, what do I need? How am I going to manage these feelings? And what am I going to do next? So it's not burying the tough feelings, but it's just putting a little bit of space so you can tap into kind of unpacking it in a more rational way. And I'll talk about that when we kind of talk about becoming our own coaches. I mentioned, go ahead.
Yeah, I've one question here. In a newsletter a couple weeks ago, it just kind of dawned on me, hey, like I read a newsletter to high school coaches who are all either coaching endurance athletes, and many of them have been endurance athletes. And I wrote it from the perspective of like, hey, we understand this process, so we are uniquely equipped to deal with this. Are there any kind of, what do I want to say, like the I can't think of anything better, the dark side of that, that like coaches want to grind and coaches just want to endure, and coaches, one thing we really do as coaches is we're used to planning our training schedule with an end point in mind. And whether it's the state meet or state track, those things aren't here. So is there anything that you would caution a distance coach against, that you maybe wouldn't say to maybe the other educators you work with who are not cross country and track coaches?
Well, I think it's really, important to know that, or to remind ourselves that we cannot assist or help or coach or equip somebody to do something without taking care of ourselves along the way. And so when you talk about just grinding down, leading into it, I think of that, that term grit. I think of like unreasonable suffering, and I think that when I say put things in terms of a frame or a lens, one of the things that can come up is say, well, this might be the opportunity here for our team to focus on asking for what we need, or setting boundaries, or this is a season of adaptability or flexibility, and this also might be the season that really tests some of those things that we're teaching. Like when we say it's not about the trophies or it's not about the medals, like how are we able to adjust and pivot when things are thrown at us? And so, that's I think what I'm talking about in terms of like really finding that frame or lens, like how can we as a team take this and what are we going to turn it into along the way?
Yeah.
I think all teachers, all coaches are naturally sort of other-minded. We like to give. We like to take care of others. We like to teach. We like to mentor, inspire. A lot of those things come from like things outside of ourselves, or an intrinsic desire to serve others. And in that, I think like parenting so often, we can sometimes forget to show ourselves the same care and attention. And I think that's the danger spot. I think if and kids pick up on it, our own kids, our students, our athletes, certainly if they just see us sacrifice for others without the modeling of taking care of ourselves, setting a boundary, asking for what we need, we're certainly passing that on, and they don't want to feel that way. They don't want to feel like that we're giving up everything for them because they care for us back, right? So I think keeping that in mind, that those that are around us, that we're giving and serving or teaching or whatever, especially our team, need to be able to see us taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, man, I really want to ask a question that came up from a fantastic coach last night about boundaries and him doing a great job up until their last meet of the season, which is last week, and wanting to give his kids a lot, and then already on Sunday they're like, I need workouts, I need training for the next few weeks, and he's like, I'm not ready to give that to you, right? But why don't we table that one for the live webinar? And you have such a great outline here. You did just talk about the other-mindedness making us happen. I thought this was so interesting. Compassion doesn't actually lead to burnout like we might think.
Yeah. So, and this is research based. So when I say being other-minded, this comes out of the work of Yale University. Dr. Lisa Santos is psychology professor there. And, she's done a bunch of courses on the art of happiness and all these sorts of things. And she, a lot of times when we, especially as coaches and teachers, caregivers, parents, when we get to that place of compassion fatigue or burnout, I'll talk about self-care and the importance of it in a second, but we actually, like, if we can dig back into being other-minded or draw on our compassion for others, it can actually energize us, make us happier, and it does change the brain. So gratitude, for example, changes the chemistry in your brain. And I call this the art of the assist. And so going back to that race, right, Courtney Dauwalter could not have run 68 laps or 283 miles unless she had her assist, Harvey Lewis. And before the race, Courtney had actually said, like, her motivation, what was going to inspire her and keep her going in this particular race, was getting herself to the starting line so that others could stay in the game. And so she actually said, I have this quote from her. She said, my motivation is not to be the one to ruin the game. It's to help the ones around me so we can all keep looking for our limits. We all lift each other up just by stepping up to the start line. And so her motivation was to keep going so that others could stay in the game and keep going too. Ultimately, she ended up being the winner. But I think it's important that in this crazy endurance event, whether it's the pandemic or the course of your season, that sometimes we can actually, keep going, find inspiration and motivation by being other-minded or thinking about what others might need, having that compassion, understanding our role of as motivators or sources of inspiration. Now, I say that, right? Knowing that there's no way that you can keep getting to that starting line and ignore your needs. So Harvey Lewis ended up being Courtney Dauwalter's assist. There's no way he could run 67 laps just by wanting to get Courtney to lap 68 without making sure that along the way he was taking care of his needs, that he was paying attention to his feelings, hydrating, taking the rest that he needed. So we cannot assist others without that focus on ourselves as well. And I think that's what we forget to do sometimes. But this, when we talk about the, staying in there for the long term, we have to find those ways to find, to make sure we're getting what we need every single lap. And so, in the course of the metaphor, that might look, different for every single coach or teacher, but we can't just run, go from one lap to another, to another, to another without taking some time to pause, reset, rethink, eat, sleep. And that's, a lot of times we call that self-care. I'm not a huge fan of that term because I think it gets attached to certain things like that aren't necessarily realistic all of the time. I think we all know we're supposed to take care of ourselves, but like it's not that easy to do necessarily. And I think self-care in general refers to like this lifestyle, whereas really when
I'm going to interrupt for a second. Like we live in this state where like, oh, let's go to a yoga retreat and let's go like on our backpacking trip and let's do our da 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 da. When I'm listening to you thinking, what's cool about the assist thing is he had to hydrate, he had to eat, he had to tape up his blisters, he had to change his shoes, like everything that she was doing, he had to do. Mm-hmm. And maybe the analogy is if you tell your kids to fuel and sleep and not try and, run every workout to the max, maybe you need to fuel, you need to sleep, and you need to get enough exercise to keep your stress level low and to feel good. But this is not the time to, have your greatest marathon training in addition to coaching high school. So, and I don't mean to get us off track, but as I was listening to you, I was thinking, what if we just made it as simple as the things that I teach and preach with my athletes, I need to be doing other than like repeat thousands, I need to be doing pretty much everything else as well.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly, if we can walk our talk, we're much more influential. We're much more, our voice has much more authenticity and impact. And certainly though, like, yeah, we are, we're not going out and going to do mile repeats, just like we're asking our kids to do or whatever, but there is like an equivalent to that. Right. And so like, I call this just, you've got to find like a W every day. And a W is like a win. And it doesn't have to be a big W. It doesn't have to like, be, okay, I'm going to start running 5 miles every day because I obviously need more exercise. But if we can just focus on the things that we can control and really celebrate that as a true win for ourselves, then we can start seeing access points to what people call self-care. But, like you said, yeah, going on a yoga retreat, even getting up every morning, doing yoga or taking 3 deep breaths or, there's a lot of things out there that we're supposed to be practicing in terms of self-care. But I want to invite us to think about it, even just like in a more simple way. And to, when we do have a W, to really like celebrate that. And so what I mean by that is like, we might not be able to say, get up, parent our kids, go to school, teach in, who knows what our set of circumstances might be, go to practice, get in a 5-mile run, come home, be in a good mood for our family, then go grade, papers till 10, 11 or night, drink water, and then sleep through the night and get up and do it again. Like that's just not, often what is reality. But in that, I might not be able to run 5 miles, but during practice, I might be able to run the warm up with my team. I might be able to do some of their strides with them. Just something, right, to get my body moving. And so that, if like I can warm up with the team, is a win for that day. Or maybe it is like, for me, if I can get to the point where the laundry basket is empty, right? That it's like it's empty, okay. Like I've emptied it before something goes back in it. I stop and I say, look at me. Like that is a win today. That empty laundry basket brings me a little moment of joy. And like an empty laundry basket right now is a big deal. So, just finding these little things without that pressure of having to do it all can help us. And, I call this my magic jelly bean, because like as a ultra marathoner, there's a lot that happens in the dark moments of a race, usually in the middle of the night. And in my last 100 miler, I ran it without any pacers. So I was alone through the night. And so and you get spread out. So you actually are alone on trail. And in the darkness of the night, there's often, sort of your low points in energy and mood and all that sort of thing. And I hit one of those really low points, and I switched over to like eating my little gummies to eating jelly beans. And I took like a jelly bean, and I ate that jelly bean, and it tasted so good. Like I was just like, this jelly bean is amazing. Like it's so delicious right now. And I just started to focus on like just that change of, what I was eating. It changed my mood. It made me like, get back in it mentally. And so it was just like this tiny little switch that I made, not necessarily it being this total game changer. My pace didn't change. The way my body felt didn't really change, but it was just one thing I did to consciously like try and make a shift. And so I think if every day we can just find one tiny little moment, right, that we can focus on and say, that was my win for today. That was what I did today, to just kind of take back a little bit from, these set of circumstances and celebrate it. And it's a shift of being like deficit minded to focusing on like the asset. Like instead of saying, well, I didn't get my 5-mile run in today, that really, like, I'm just getting, more middle-aged and more out of shape and more of this, but no, I did get outside and I ran some strides and I got my heart rate up. Right.
Kim, yeah, and not that I'm the best example of these things, but I mean, I went for a 14-minute bike ride on my stationary bike in the next room over before this interview, partly because I feel better on an interview then, but partly because I don't know how the rest of the day is going to go, right? Yeah. And I know I can just speak from all I know is that one thing that's really helped me in COVID is just really going from the only workouts that count are an hour workouts. The only meals that count are these really good home cooked meals to, did we have broccoli tonight? Was I on my stationary bike? And I did a few kettlebell swings and, yeah. And self-care. It was so cool to hear that you don't love the term, because another coach last night who I really respect, I said, should I ask her about self-care? Should I ask all the coaches about this? What do they do for self-care? He's like, yeah, you should. He's like, but I don't know if I like that term. So, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of pressure with that, like, and I think the expectation of what that looks like right now is often, like I said, unrealistic. And I think as coaches, as teachers, as either current or former endurance athletes, I think one of the things that is hard for us is not going big. It's like we tend to want to go big and like work hard and play hard, and like we like to take things on. And I think if we can right now, and I'll talk about this in terms of developing like your inner coach, this like to practice that art of being gentle with ourselves and accepting, and to again focus like on what's within our control, but have pride in that, have pride in like I ran strides, as opposed to I have to sit down and carve out a 90-day training plan to get back in shape. So these little celebrations are ways that we can develop a relationship with ourselves that is more forgiving, more accepting, more gentle. And, kids experience this beyond belief right now. Like the amount of pressure that modern day adolescent kids are under to be good at everything and do everything perfect and be super, high achievers, in all realms of their life. If we can go in and model, like, I'm going to really give myself credit for running the warm up with you all today, is a way to, model that idea of having a positive relationship with yourself.
Yeah. Kim, I didn't know I was going to get so much parenting advice out of this too. This is awesome. This is like a win-win. This is essentially my job, and I'm going to be
Well,
becoming.
coaching and parenting, gosh, there's a lot that overlap there. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. Our kids that we were talking before this are about the same age, and I don't think I saw that until the last probably a year or so. And one interesting thing in this thing in COVID too is that it's been great for our family. They're doing a lot more, whether it's baking or laundry or just doing some physical activities in terms of hiking and biking that they weren't doing before. And one thing I'm thinking about now is I hear that from a lot of people, whether you have kids or not, that there have been some positives here. So maybe being grateful for that's important. Well, why don't we wrap up with this? Because we will have time on the live webinar to talk a little more. What do you mean when you talk about develop your inner coach and those concepts, and why is that something? Well, one thing I think might be important too. Coaches are essentially entering this time where they're probably not going to see their athletes as much. So November, December, January, state rules, holidays, things like that. And the type of coach who's listening to this, the type of coach who's part of this webinar series, is somebody who really works on themselves as a coach, is the coach who's trying to make a jump from, always making the state meet to trying to be on the podium. So what does that mean for this type of, I don't want to say ultra motivated coach, but motivated more motivated than your average coach?
Well, when I say develop your inner coach, this is a tool that coaches, I think, naturally do to some degree in teaching their athletes, right? A lot of times it refers to a component of positive self-talk. I'm guessing most coaches out there have some element in which they're coaching the skill of positive self-talk in their athletes. What I am sort of saying here is that it's a lot of times easier for us to encourage someone else, coach someone else, or say something, encouraging or positive or supportive to somebody else going through something. So often compassion comes to us maybe more easily than, say, self-compassion. But if we can, by the practice of developing our inner coach, one, we're better able to manage ourselves through a difficult time, but we are also much more effective teachers of the tools in our athletes. So if we want our kids to be resilient, to have a positive sense of self, to have a strong like inner voice, and we're not practicing that ourselves, we are far less effective teachers of that tool. And so like a lot of times when we think about, oh, the inner coach, or positive self-talk, there's a couple of things that we can do to really deepen that skill and make it much more effective. And it's really research based. And so there's a couple of steps that you can do to build this skill in yourself, which then makes you better able to pass it on, if that makes sense. And so the first step is really just hitting the pause button. So when we're in a difficult situation, we're feeling overwhelmed, a lot of times we are ruminating, right? We're having like a negative thought, another negative thought, or we're repeating sort of the same soundtrack in our head. Like, this is too much. I can't do this. I'm sick of this. I need out of this. I don't want to do this anymore. Blah, whatever the script is, right? To notice it and to put a pause button on it, disrupt it, and to name what's going on in terms of like how you're feeling. So, okay, stop. Kim, right now, this is anxiety. This is what anxiety looks like and feels like. You're feeling anxious. You're angry. All right. You're angry about this, that, and the other, and you're feeling insecure. And so naming it and just, this is the first kind of part of psychological distancing that I talked about. And you might have noticed that I talked to myself using my name. I said, Kim, or coach, time out, coach. This is anxiety, right? So it often like looks like and sounds like the same thing we might be doing to support a friend. And when I teach this skill in young people, one of the first things I have them do is to take out a stack of Post-its and write down the actual like words and phrases that you would say to somebody you really care about if they needed encouragement. And you can do this with your kids too. So another little parenting thing too, if your kid gets in that self-defeating rumination place, is what would you say to a friend right now if they're going through this? And to write down those words in quotations. And so as a coach, what might we say to our student athlete if they were having a tough time? Get those words out on paper, because those words are much easier to say to someone else than they are to ourselves, but they actually should look really similar. So it's sort of that first step of how are you going to coach yourself? We'll start with how you coach others. Write it down. So once you name it, like, Kim, this is anxiety. The second step is to connect it. A lot of times our feelings of being overwhelmed come from a sense of isolation. Like, we're the only ones in it right now. We're feeling abandoned. We're feeling unsupported. We're, whatever it might be. But if we can connect what we're experiencing to like humanity at large, we're just like we might say to someone, you're not alone. Like, listen, you're not alone. I'm here for you. I've got you. You've got this and I've got you. If you can connect your experience, like, I'm not the only one, trying to get through a pandemic right now. Like, this is normal. This is like feeling anxious, feeling self-doubt, feeling insecure. Like, those are really valid things to feel right now, Kim. And then the last step is to coach it. If you need to go to your Post-its, you can go to your Post-its, but you can start saying and doing the behaviors that you might do to support somebody else. And it is research-based that if you can create more psychological distance between what those initial feelings are and how you're coaching it, that the more calm and the better you're able to manage your feelings. And so that might mean using your name. Like, LeBron James does this often. He'll say, well, what LeBron James needs to do right now is the best thing for LeBron James. And like, it sounds like this weird, like not so social thing. And, so maybe we just say it in our head, but I often will say it out loud, especially if I'm out on trail. But it is actually a really effective emotional like management tool, because it puts just a little bit of space between you and the feelings. So you kind of step outside yourself for a second and actually become, that outside coach, even though, it's still you. And so using your name, creating some distance, kind of coaching it like from the outside in, helps you manage your emotions, which then puts you in a little bit more of a rational thinking place, to figure out, all right, I'm going to get through this. What do I need to get through this? What do I need to ask for? What's my next step? And that gets you out of that stuck place, like that kind of awful, overwhelming, like drowning feeling, to being able to figure out how you're going to climb out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is fantastic. As somebody who's spent way too much time in his life ruminating, I mean, to think that I could pause and say, Jay, like this is fantastic. And it's
Well,
so
it's what you want your athletes to be doing as well, right? So like I said, this is a actual process that I will use with students or athletes or teachers or whoever. But I practice it all the time. I have a nickname for myself. It seems weird, but try it. Give it a try.
Yeah. That's awesome, folks. What you wouldn't have known. Well, I kind of alluded to it. My daughter is blessed to go to this school where Kim has written a large part of the social emotional learning curriculum for the school. And Kim, I don't think you knew this. She had kind of like a 2-subject start to the school year, and half of it was this class. So for the first 6, 7, 8 weeks, that's all she was doing. I'm like, man, how lucky was she that she was learning these skills right away, like 6th grade, going to middle school. Granted, there's not the in-person social things that are hard, but there's other things that are hard. And so yeah, just to do it publicly, thank you for all that work, because she's definitely she's benefiting from that greatly.
Awesome.
Oh, I didn't mean to do this where I'm a big screen. That's an operator error. Here we go. Why don't we share the screen now? We're getting ready. We're nearing time here. This is absolutely fantastic. If you don't mind, I'm going to let you kind of take the reins at times when I do our live one. The idea being, you've coached yourself. You obviously know what the research says. And I think you're going to be able to ask some good questions. I'm going to be interviewing the other 3 coaches next. Is there anything that you're curious about? I mean, you haven't been coaching high school this year, but you've coached for many years. Is there some obvious question I should be asking them? And I'm hoping to ask all 3 coaches. One coaches girls, your brother coaches boys, and then Jonathan Dalby coaches boys and girls.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, and I have a close relationship with my brother. I see what he, the work he does, and, the professional side of that, but then the personal side of that too. And I think my question would be, is what did you hope your team got out of this season, and what do you think they actually did get out of this season? Like, what was maybe the W of the season, and how might you be able to leverage that going into next season? But I think everyone's experiences have been really different, and all the rules, and just to make a race happen this year really has taken so much more time and energy. and one thing like on my mind, or I guess in my heart right now too, we're looking at what teachers are going through and what coaches are going through, is I just don't think that if you don't have a coach or a teacher in your life right now, that you really understand like what it is that they are giving to all of us right now. And so, I think for me, I feel, great desire to share with like the world this, what teachers and coaches have given our kids, have given our economy, have given, and in terms of their own personal sacrifices, some of them, putting their health at risk. I mean, they're like, for me, there's a big, I have a big desire of appreciation and gratitude for teachers and coaches. So I don't know if there's a question in there. Maybe there's like, what's one
Yeah.
thing you want people to know, about like what's happening behind the scenes for you?
Yeah, I think my
Or what do you need?
yeah, I have a list of questions. I do think they address the part two, but yeah, part one is, going into this, all these coaches have won state championships. They've coached. I don't know if Coach Dalby's coached for decades, but he has coached for 1 decade, I'm sure. And I'm sure they had an idea of what a win would mean this year. But I mean, I think that's an absolutely great question. Like now that it's over. And then I actually don't know if it's useful to go into how every different state did it, but it might be useful with these three coaches to talk about a little bit, because it's totally different. I mean, your brother didn't have a state meet. Jesse in Ohio pretty much has a state meet at the normal time of year. Coach Dalby, they ran it way early, and it was, he has a team of 100 kids. I talked to his assistant one week, and they had to go to 4 different meets to give all the kids an opportunity. And so, there's a staff that's experiencing burnout just to have, the 80th kid on a team have a good experience. So Kim, this was absolutely fantastic. I look forward to sharing this with everyone, and thanks for your time today. And I look forward to joining you next Wednesday. And I think our weather, at least the long-term forecast, is you might be able to go on a trail run between now and then, and I might be able to go ride my mountain bike between now and then. So
yeah, air is clear, sun is out. That's my W.
Yeah, well, that's for us too. I mean, man, if you're an endurance athlete in our state, I mean, it's just so sad with the fires. And if you were watching out for your own health, there were just a lot of days where you couldn't go run and ride. So, yeah.
Yeah. So seeing that blue sky again is something to celebrate.
Exactly. All right, Kim. Thanks. This has been fantastic, and I'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Yeah, great talking to you, Jay.
Wow, I really enjoyed that conversation with Kim O'Malley. I always learn so much from a coaching perspective, but it's also really neat to get parenting tips as well. So, yeah, Kim is part of the panel discussion on burnout that we'll be doing with Jesse Magato and John O'Malley, and that'll be webinar number 1 of the 12 webinar series with the 2020-2021 Boulder Running Clinics Winter Webinar Series. You're probably watching this after the clinic series has started or when the whole thing is done. But if you still go to boulderrunningclinics.com, you can purchase all the videos, and we also have audio for each webinar as well, which means you can simply use your phone and listen to it like you would a podcast. All right, if you have any questions, just email us at info@boulderrunningclinics.com.